notification shortly. There we go. My name is Julian or Jules. My pronouns are it or they. I'm the project coordinator for the Reaffirm project happening with Affirm United right now. And this panel here is part of that project. We are so excited to share with you. Here with us today, we have Ayodele, Chris, and Kendra, who will all introduce themselves in a moment. And we have quite the conversation in store for you. So I will turn it over to Chris, who has his microphone on first, to start with the introductions.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is Chris. My pronouns are he, him. I make my home on Treaty 7 territory here in Calgary. But I'm also a student at the Vancouver School of Theology, finishing a Master of Divinity and Master of Arts in Theological Studies. For the last 20 years, I've worked in the nonprofit sector, mostly in frontline positions in HIV, in poverty, in harm reduction, and my own connection with the social gospel brought me to seminary. And my work in sort of the queer activism scene has been everything from pride parades to starting a chapter of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence in Alberta, now defunct, but helping organize a drag Easter service in Calgary a few years ago that exploded on the scene, or preaching at drag communion in Vancouver. So my activism has taken on different sort of forms in different places. And right now, I'm not really doing much of anything but finishing this degree so that I can get out and start doing the bigger stuff. So that's me in a nutshell.
Thank you. And we'll toss it over to Kendra.
Hi, everybody. Good morning. Good Saturday morning to all. My name's Kendra Mitchel-Foster, and I am a settler, an uninvited guest, and I make my life on the traditional and unceded territory of the Kwetli, which is currently known as Prince George, BC. And I'm coming to you on this beautiful morning where our snow is melting quickly. And so it just reminds me that when I do territorial acknowledgements, that I also want to acknowledge that I endeavor to live gently on the land, and always in right relations with Indigenous people. So I am sort of two things at the moment. I'm a campus minister at the University of Northern BC, which is here in Prince George. And I'm also the regional minister for justice for the Pacific Mountain region, which means that I do lots of affirming stuff with lots of different places all around the region. And we are partnered with Affirming Connections out of Calgary, too. So we have a lot of joint projects. And actually, Chris will be featured on one of our joint projects coming up in February. So stay tuned for that. But one of the things that even though I've only been a minister for a few years, I have always been an LGBTQIA plus activist. I remember, so I used to be a biologist in my old life, and I was actually a part of the LGBTQ asterisk center at the University of Winnipeg. The asterisk was because we didn't know what to do with all the letters in the early 2000s. But anyway, so I was the coordinator of a university queer activism center there for a number of years, and participated in a lot of the early efforts for same-sex adoption, same-sex immigration, and all of those things before we kind of thought that marriage would be pushed through. So I've been at this for a while, and I'm just so thrilled that my faith and my passion for human rights have come together in my work. And so we do a lot of regional campaigns opening people up to the idea of affirming as intersectional, how things interconnect. And I really like recommending movies to people. So I do a lot of that to try to get conversation going And the other thing, I'm just going to be finished right away. Sorry. The other thing that I do is that I'm a voluntarily associated minister at Trinity United Church here in Prince George. And so before I was in seminary, I was a member of that church, and I've been chair of the affirming committee for a long time at that church, and have helped another few congregations in the city go through their own affirming process, and none of them were United Church. So it's quite, the queers in PG are very ecumenical. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing, Kendra. And I'll have to get your letterboxed later if you like recommending movies to people. Ayodele, hi. I'll get you to introduce
Hi,
yourself.
everyone. I'm Ayodele Moffett. I am hailing from Oshawa right now, Oshawa, Ontario. I am a student of Masters of Divinity and Masters of Psychospiritual Studies at Emmanuel College. I have been working in the nonprofit sector as well, with individuals with autism, um, pervasive developmental disorders, mental health concerns, or just neurodivergence, if you want to say that. It's been for about 20 years or so. That is a passion of mine. I love to inspire individuals supported to achieve their goals and their dreams. Um, I would like after graduation to work with also continue to work with the neurodivergent community as a psychotherapist. Um, and I, I am also too, I would say like an activist as well. I've volunteered with Pride in Pride events in Alberta, Pride events in BC, Pride events in Toronto. I also partnered with my company, my employer right now, Carrie's Place, in supporting individuals who are also neurodivergent, participate within Pride activities within our company. Um, I love the Lord, and I am have experienced religious trauma as well, but the love that I have for God has kept me here and kept me curious and wondering about uh, theology and the divine, and I want to for everyone who's been harmed by the church, I just want to hug them. I just want to be a person who can say, it should never have happened. It shouldn't happen. And we can still love God and we can still be ourselves, and God accepts us as we are. Um, and so that brings me here today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I see we have a hello in the chat. If any of you that are in the room today want to offer a hello, maybe where you're tuning in from, why you're here with us today, we would love to hear that. The first question that I'm going to pose to our panelists, you three can hop in whatever order you'd like, is I would love to hear a story from you about a really meaningful moment that you have had as part of your advocacy. That could be in your community, that could be in your own spiritual life. I'll invite you to share a meaningful moment that you've had.
Should we paper, rock, scissors? I'll share one because it's really quick. I think, as many people know, the political climate right now in Alberta is the worst it's ever been, maybe for queer folks, especially for trans folks. And a couple of years ago, I attended a rally for trans rights. And the thing is that the congregation that I was attending at the time showed up, and in fact 2,000 people showed up, and it was the most palpable experience of the Holy Spirit I think I've ever had. And these little old ladies, little old church ladies, shoulder to shoulder, cisgender heterosexuals, standing there holding their fists up in the air, like there was this outpouring of hope. It was a spiritual experience, and that had never happened to me at a protest rally before. But it was just this beautiful example of something simple that faith community came together and participated in as well. That absolutely changed me. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really powerful. Being an ally, being an accomplice, I like to say, right? Putting yourself on the line to be there with community members is really quite powerful. Yeah.
I can share one from a few years ago. Um, so I'm relatively new to the regional minister position. And the first year that I was in this position, there was a real emphasis that we really needed to have a bigger focus on affirming ministry, and really needed to draw people into this idea that as an affirming region, because the Pacific Mountain region itself became affirming in 2022 or 2022. Sorry. And so we needed to have this focus, a region-wide focus, something that would hold communities together. We have a lot of communities in the region that are in their process. They've just completed their process. They've been affirming for a while, but there wasn't very much to connect everybody all together. So I decided to recommend a movie. And we did a Pi Day campaign. So Pi Day is at the United Church of Canada, is our National Affirming Day. And it's on, of course, Pi, March 14th, 3.14. And Pi stands for public, intentional, and explicitly affirming the queer community. So I wanted to sort of start it off with a bang. And I started a campaign throughout the region for people to screen the movie of 1946, just to start the conversations going. And so if you haven't heard of it, the link to it is 1946movie.com. I think I'll put it in the chat. I'll actually figure out what it is. But it's the subtitle for it, or the subtitle, the byline is called The Mistranslation That Shifted Culture. And that movie talks about 1946, the movie. Thanks, Julian. That movie talks about how the word homosexual was not in the Bible before 1946, and that there has been a cultural shift around that, and it hasn't been that long. So it's something that we need to know about our history, and something that we need to know about moving. Oh, yay, Chris. Yes. Something that we need to focus on learning about so that we can move forward. So I had 10 communities around the region screening on Pi Day, and we had some sponsored screenings throughout the year. And then this is the actual moment. So that's a lot of backstory. But at the AGM, the annual general meeting for the Pacific Mountain region that year, we had a screening of the movie, and there was a choir. So we have an affirming night, and there was a choir called the New Westminster Rainbow Chorus. And they were actually sort of a church adjacent choir that was started by Queen Street and Sanctuary on 6th in New West. And this was a place where people could come to sing, to be together, to be a part of this social movement without having to go to church. A lot of folks had religious trauma. They said they would never step back into a church. So these were people who were working out that trauma as through the arts, through singing, through music. And so they agreed to come into a church, St. Andrew's Wesley in Vancouver, which is giant and full of stained glass, and it's stone and it's very fancy, to sing, not hymns, but sing like queer songs, queer cultural songs at our affirming night. And there was a few songs before, and then one song after the film. And the whole sanctuary was full. And as they sang their song, which was True Colors by Cyndi Lauper, as they sang True Colors at the end, there was really not a dry eye in the house. And after that, just the energy in the room, after they closed their song, and the amount of people that thanked me for the movie and became really involved in affirming ministry after that, it was incredible. It was sort of a tsunami of support. And so that alchemical magic, the Holy Spirit coming through Cyndi Lauper into the sanctuary, full of people who were hungry to be able to serve God in this way, was really transformative.
Thank you. That sounds amazing. You're painting this picture, and I can just imagine the chorus of voices, yeah, what a beautiful scene that must have been. Yeah, thank you for sharing.
For me, a meaningful moment. I think it was couple semesters ago, where I was given a video by the Reform Project, where it was an evening with Reverend David, and he was sharing how his ministry was a gay man in ministry and with his partner, and how for years he sort of hid but didn't hide. But towards the end of his talk, when he said he thought God chose him in spite of his queerness to be in ministry, and at the end, he said, now, I believe at the age of 70 or so, he now feels that God chose him because of his queerness, because he is gay, to be a vessel of love and support and community. And his words were so inspiring to me as a budding theological student, because for years, uh, because of my family background, coming from the Seventh-day Adventist Church, uh, was told that basically somebody like me could never be in ministry. And when I say me, I identify as queer, gay, lesbian. Um, and so those were like words that I felt like I could never participate. I could always just sit in the pews, but I could never really participate. And his words at the end, as of his career, was very powerful, and that was a meaningful moment for me. And it's kind of like, you can do it too.
That's wonderful. Thank you. You know, as you three can attest, I'm sure being involved in this kind of work pulls at every heartstring that we have, both from our own personal lived experience and from the experience that we can see those are having around us through the work at Affirm United. We we see and hear these sorts of stories all the time. And one of my favorite, I'll share a story. One of my favorite stories of resilience that occur across the country are, we hear from communities of faith that their pride flags are being torn down or their rainbow steps have been vandalized, right? And there's these acts of hate that are occurring all across the country. And communities of faith are resilient as ever, and they, put the pride flag up higher the next time, right? Or they use a stronger coat of paint on the next set of steps. And it really, I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it, because it really goes to show what the passion behind being community can do and can mean for people. And, I just imagine this small town community having their flag torn down and, somebody seeing that and being discouraged, and then seeing a bigger flag hanging up there the next day, what that would mean for people in that community to know that these these people are making that commitment to say that we are not afraid, and or if we are afraid, we're going to keep doing it anyway because it's important and it really, really matters. And I think there are elements of that in each one of your stories that you shared. And it's such a crucial part of what we do. I'm curious about um, how you got involved in advocacy work, perhaps professionally, personally, spiritually. What drew you to being an advocate or to doing advocacy work in your spaces?
I can take a turn to go first this time. I was going to wait for you, Chris, but then I thought that's not fair to make him do it every time. Um, so I think my mom would say that even as a child, I was always rooting for the underdog. That's how she phrases it. And as a queer person who grew up in small town Manitoba, I felt like an underdog at some times. But one of the things that really spurred me on into advocacy was actually one of my first girlfriends was a Seventh-day Adventist as well. Yeah, and I remember going with her to a church service for Easter, and the entire community, when the stone was rolled away and the tomb was empty, the entire community in the sanctuary was on their feet. And they were saying, like, praise be, hallelujah. And she grabbed my hand in that moment in her Seventh-day Adventist church. And nobody knew. No, she was not out. I was just the weird white friend that she used to spend time witnessing with. And in that moment, I thought, there are so many beloved people around me that have to hide. And because of who I am and how I was raised, I've never felt like I had to hide. And so in that moment, I understood that even though things aren't as bad as they were, even though things aren't as bad as they could be, like in other places, there's a lot of work to be done. And at that time in Winnipeg, there was a United Church that was affirming. Actually, it was Jordan Cantwell's church. She was the old one of the moderators of the church, and I was really puzzled as to why she would spend so much time in the church advocating within the church instead of trying to change society. Then I went with Faith to her church service, and I thought, oh, that's why. And so that moment stayed with me for a really long time. And I still think of her often. And I think of, as we have at Trinity United, and now also with the Pacific Mountain region, I do a specific queer worship. It's every month in Prince George, but it's quarterly broadcast for the whole region. And every time I do a queer worship, it's worship for queer people, by queer people, allies, and accomplices welcome. I think about her. I think about her and the whole congregation so enthusiastically loving God, and her feeling like only half of her could show up. And so that was a really big moment for me. And that was even before I was Christian. But it still sticks with me. So she was a really important teacher in my life.
Thank you. What a beautiful moment to to remember, and for her to want to share with you. Such a powerful moment. Yeah. Thank you.
I'll share. So a number of things have drawn me to this affirming, positive Christian space is years ago I was involved with Exodus International. Um, um, Primarily as a Christian, thinking that I could change. As a Christian, knowing that within my family setting, being gay was a no go. It was not something that was accepted within my family system. Um, so years later, after graduating from a Seventh-day Adventist university, I decided that I'm going to not run from my sexual identity and face my sexual identity head on and come out. It was a painful journey. It meant letting go, and for a long time, I felt homeless in sense of not having a church, not having a church community. Um, I left my friends, I left people that I had been worshiping with for years, and just like you said, Kendra, there's something so special about the Seventh-day Adventist Church and how they worship in the community, and I lost all of that. And fast forward to this year, actually just in December, I am now officially a member of the United Church of Canada. Just became a member for 20 something years. I wasn't a member of any congregation or any religious body. So it's been a journey. So I'm grateful for the United Church and the acceptance that I've received within United Church and within Westminster United Church here in Whitby. But the painful journey of having gone through an agency like Exodus International and feeling that there was hope to change, and then facing the reality that what was the journey was to actual acceptance. And so that is sort of the mantra that sort of stays with me, is acceptance. Acceptance as not in part, but in whole. And so that's the sort of the journey of where I'm at, and what I want to bring to other people is acceptance. And to be a vessel of that acceptance of through Jesus. It is so important that our queer family, I call family, that they know that they are loved, that they are accepted, that they are seen, they are heard, they are valued. it's important. And like it just, I don't know, my heart aches when I think of the people who have been given messages that they are not loved, or that they need to change, or that there's something that needs to be fixed. Um, it's a long time, long journey for me to get to this point, and I think I'm still learning, I'm still evolving, I'm still hoping and loving, and I feel that the unconditional love that we have in God can uh, can be given to all, and should be. Like we shouldn't withhold anything from our brothers and sisters in Christ, our brothers and sisters with whomever, whatever faith. Um, so yeah, that's a bit about my journey.
Thank you. It really resonates a lot with me, the pieces you shared about acceptance and wanting other people to feel this love and acceptance of God. And I think it's really powerful what you've just shared. Thank you.
Like, I would say that my advocacy and activism is born out of pain. Like Kendra, my mom always said, Christopher, you always have to find a soapbox to stand on. But I was a queer, neurodiverse kid in the 80s with no diagnosis. And the absolute pain that I experienced growing up was awful. And so having lived the experience of other, even though, like presenting at the top echelon of privilege, there were still other dynamics that were happening for me that were really, really, really painful. And like I grew up in a fundamentalist context, and then my teens went to a mainline church. And at the time, it was not. It was there was this was the early. This is 1999, 2000. So things weren't as far along as they could have been. I was denied the ordination process because I had come out as gay. And my whole world sort of crumbled around that because my whole identity had centered around the church and Christian life. And now all of a sudden, I no longer fit the story. And so all of everything that I've done, I would say, has been born out of the pain of that experience. And also, I would say that there's great joy in the advocacy and the activism. But I talked to a spiritual director 2 weeks ago who said that people who move into these helping roles or these advocacy roles do so because they're trying to be the person that wasn't there for them when they needed it. So those are the birthplaces of it for me. And so in every career path that I chose, like every job that I took kind of throughout my 25-year career history has been in disability, and not just like working in a group home, but working for Inclusion Alberta, seeking to sort of break down stereotypes and what people's lives can look like if they have a disability. Having the experience of being HIV positive also has put me into a different place while I was working in the field of HIV. And so all of a sudden there's that othering, and then there's that becoming. And so all of the, you start to, you start to develop an ear and an eye often, and sometimes you miss it, for when there is exclusion, right? When it's happening. And so that's, I think that's been kind of the propelling force is the fire of that pain, which is a gift. And also, I would never want anybody to sort of tell me that it's a gift, but that is the gift of where I find myself now through that.
Thank you. And I so appreciate the diversity of experiences among the three of you. And I'll share I'll share as well. I was very frequently labeled a social justice warrior from a young age. My brother just always brought it up. I would bring up something at the dinner table. He'd be like, not this again, right? And because of the years of activism and advocacy of the people that came before me, I feel very blessed and very lucky to have had queer people in my life in the church from as early as I can remember. I was in Sunday school and one of my classmates had two moms, and I was like, cool, right? How awesome. And it was always sort of a part of my world in a way that was not tokenizing. It wasn't anything like that. I didn't meet an out queer person outside of my church community until my late teens. And so to me, it was always sort of hand in hand. Of course, there's queer people in the church. Why wouldn't there be? When I was in my first queer relationship, at about 18 or 19, I was working at a church in Vancouver, a United Church, and I went to the minister and I said, "Hey, can I bring the person that I'm dating to church?" And I just remember her looking at me and going, "Well, why couldn't you?" And in that moment, something sort of, crackled in my head. Oh yeah, why wouldn't I be? I wouldn't ask you if I could bring if I was in a heterosexual relationship, I wouldn't ask you if I could bring my partner to church. I wouldn't feel like I needed to have this permission. So why was there that feeling? And I think a lot of my activism and why I got so involved with Affirm and other organizations of the like, because I had that experience of, of course we're in church. Of course we're in church and we're in leadership roles. Of course we're in church and we're clapping along to the hymns and making actions for Draw the Circle Wide, right? Of course we're in church. And much like you say, we're saying Ayodele, I want people to feel that love of God, to feel the power of community, to feel the invigoration that comes with being represented and being a part of something bigger than yourself. And so elements of all three of your story really, really resonate with me, and I'm sure many of the folks listening as well. And so as we are thinking about where we have come from, it's also important for us to think about where we're going, right? And how the people around us can support the work that we're doing, engage in the work that we're doing. And so I'm curious about how can communities of faith or communities more broadly participate in this advocacy work that we are talking about and that we are working through. And what are some ways or pointers that you may have for communities of faith?
I'll bite. I think that right now there is a really great opportunity for the church to be more prophetic than it's ever been before. And you already have this cluster of folks who are gathering and are gathering around the same kind of gospel, a social justice gospel usually. And so there's an opportunity to do things that create a really big bang. Like Shaughnessy Heights United Church does drag communion often. And that is queering evangelism, right? That's an opportunity for people to see we mean it, right? Like really these big bang sort of things. The other thing is that right now the world is on fire. And so having communities, little pockets of resistance, of hope is really, really important that we can gather around. And so for communities of faith to start connecting with broader organizations, like in Calgary, there's the Alliance for the Common Good, different things like that. Help to propel things forward. Letter writing campaigns are really important. One of the things that I love about the United Church is that I see a national statement about a social justice issue almost every other day. Like these are really powerful witnesses. Like if, on Sunday after church, if you all march down to your MP's office, that kind of thing where there's already this community who exists together. So because power isn't bad. It's not bad. It's what you do with it. And so when there's more people who are working together, this helps change things on a bigger level, but it also is a witness. And like, I think it was Sherry DeNovo who wrote Queering Evangelism, right? And so it's that opportunity for people to see that this is a safe space where you can come and we will show you how we were going to change the world together. Yeah.
Thanks, Chris. And I think that really relates to one of your first stories you told of the powerful matriarchs at the protest, really showing up and being there together, putting the faith and the mission statements and the vision statements, putting them into action. Yeah, I can see that's a very powerful theme for you.
Yeah, like just to add to that, like posters are great. Social media posts are great, but put some foot to it. You know what I mean?
Hmm. We can think and pray, but what are we doing as well? Yeah.
I'll just jump in and piggyback on what you're saying, Chris, if that's okay. So one of the things that really I think is so important is to understand that this queer activism, affirming theology, affirming church, all queering evangelism, all of those things are part of a matrix of working as the hands of Christ and the body of Christ for a more just world. And there's a lot of people who think, okay, we're going to do the gay stuff over here, and then we'll do the anti-racist stuff over here, and then we'll do the guaranteed livable income up here. Climate is going to go over there. But one of the things that I keep on seeing on social media and just in editorials and on Substack is that everything is interconnected. So, and yes, the world is on fire. And the good news is that everything's connected. And so, even as my climate anxiety is through the roof, because in Prince George today, it's 8 degrees and the snow is melting, I can remind myself, actually, I'm doing queer worship tomorrow. And so it's connected, right? All of these things of communities going through affirming processes, it is so much more about cultivating an orientation toward all of creation that holds God's justice as central. And so when we, go to a pride parade and we're marching as a church in a pride parade, what we're actually saying is that we see a different way for the world to be. We see a different way, a different path that's already underway. It's already happening. It's already here. And we want to be on that path. And we want to welcome you if you want to be on that path. And so I think that, it's so important as well. And this is my new soapbox that I'm getting on this year. Oh yes, what is queer worship? Dale has a really good question. Queer worship is a monthly worship service that I do at Trinity United Church here in Prince George. It's online as well, and I can share the link if anybody wants to tune in tomorrow. It's a worship that centers queer theology. And it's offered by queer folks, and then it's primarily for queer folks, and allies and accomplices are very welcome. And my new soapbox, thank you for asking that, Dale, is queering theology and understanding that queer theology is not just speaking about gay issues, whatever that is, right? Queer theology is about understanding the Word of God, the living creation that is God, and our own indwelling spark as subversive, as being able to look at Scripture, being able to look at the world and say, what is God telling us that we are missing? What is it about being queer that gives us a particular window to be able to understand an element of God, an element of God's message that might be missed by other people. And for me, it's about radical love and acceptance. So we hear that a lot, and we hear it in churches about, we are the church and we will radically love and welcome you. But actually, as queer folks, we must understand that we are loved and accepted by God with no exceptions. There's nothing God would change about us. And in that love, we are commissioned to go out into the world and see that transformative love in other people, in situations that seem hopeless or wicked, in places where there's confusion, in places where people are missing a voice. And so queer theology, as we move forward in our affirming journeys, in our advocacy journeys, is much more about saying, we are here as part of this witness that God is transformative. We are here as part of this witness to draw other people into this way of being, believing that anything is possible through God, believing we are all grounded in this love. We are all woven through that Christ light, and there's hope. And so my soapbox is that queer theology is actually for everyone. Like, it is thinking about God and talking about God and worshiping and praising and singing about God from the perspective of the queer community, which is, by the way, hugely diverse, right? But it's for everybody. It is for everybody. We talk about liberation theology often. That started in Latin America. It is not only for Latin Americans. Same thing with queer theology. So this is something that I feel is really important for folks to know. It is part of what God wants for us, to turn theology inside out and upside down. Yeah, it is what God wants from us. That's what I think.
Thank you. What a beautiful response. Ayodele, I'll toss over to you in just a moment. I noticed there's a question in the chat. We are going to have some Q&A time in just a few minutes, so we will answer your question, Patricia. Thank you so much. And for other folks here, if you do have any other questions, please keep thinking on them.
Yes, everything of Kendra and Chris and Jules that you said, I resonate with, and it's, I like to hear about the advocacy and this queer worship. I'm curious and I may tune in. Like, for the work that I do with people with disabilities, I my company is like very vocal with offering virtual spaces for people who are neurodivergent and queer, and spaces for families to also understand their neurodivergent queer loved one. So I like to see that within the United Church that I attend. I mean, every worship there is a statement of affirmation. There's a statement of you're welcome, you're seen, you belong. And so wherever I go, I do try to carry that too within the community, and within the workplace. And what can we do if you're hearing comments or conversations that are, anti-queer, affirming, speak up, say something in those environments, offer a different perspective. In my workplace, I may not go in with with pride flags and stuff like that, but I'm very open to having conversations with people with regards to even things like sexuality. And if someone is presenting if one of the people that we're supporting is presenting that, maybe and having a conversation with the staff, if they feel like, oh well, this should be, well, why not, and how can we support that individual to understand or get supports. So it's even like just wherever you are, whether it's the classroom, the pulpit, the bus station, just, you know, just being that person that can provide a safe space and educate, be willing to educate, so even if it, you know, it might be a little exhausting, but just having that willingness to educate people, because sometimes it's a lack of awareness, a lack of you know, um, a, a lack of understanding. I had a coworker who scoffed at the pride flag in a I'm also involved with CUPE union. They scoffed at the colors of the pride flag within the CUPE logo, and you know, I had to have a conversation with that individual too, and just say, you know, like, you know, why did you have that? You know what I mean? People can have their own opinions, but after, you know, we spoke, I think that they realized that perhaps the reaction was a bit offensive, and you know, just to consider, you know, people in the room, and consider that this symbol may actually give somebody hope, you know, may feel that. So even within my union, I advocate for LGBTQ plus people, and try to be visible myself.
Thank you. Thanks. Before we move into our question about dreams, I think this is a good place for Patricia's questions about, we'll get each of you to sort of think on this. Have you experienced backlash within your church community? Perhaps church people fighting back to reverse your accomplishments or the work that you're doing? And if you have, how did you respond?
I think that for me, I haven't really, from within the United Church, I haven't really experienced backlash against my work, but I have experienced a lot of microaggressions along the way, which is, I think, really quite United Church. So one of the things that, you know, early on, before I was in seminary, I led some worship at one of the big downtown Vancouver churches, and it was for Christmas Day. So the clergy team was not there, and my wife and I and her parents, who are both they're biblical scholars and clergy as well. We led the Christmas Day service, and there was somebody who came up afterward and, of course, asked if Shona and I were sisters, and our parents must be so proud of us. And so I said, no, actually, this is my wife. And there was a person that said, oh, you're one of those. And so I said, yes, I am. Absolutely. We can lead worship too. And that's usually my response to people. If there are microaggressions, I just affirm and say, that's okay. You can be happy for me. You know, you can celebrate me instead. That's usually how I respond. But one of the things that I have experienced is I do a lot of work in multi-faith settings, and I've experienced a lot of people really not understanding what it's about. And it seems like I'm just talking a lot about my relationships with Seventh-day Adventist people today, but one of my favorite relationships that I've cultivated within that multi-faith setting was with, he's no longer in town, but was with a Seventh-day Adventist minister who was from Brazil. And he and I had really like diametrically opposed theology. And his time for chapel was right after my time every week. And it was right around this time when a Muslim student who was from Somalia would come in and pray. And so the three of us, so Calber and I would leave while the student would pray initially, and then later on he said, no, it would be nice if you would stay while I prayed. And so then it became us having conversations after the prayers were done. And so we would have these conversations where the student would ask about something and I would respond, and Kelber would say, oh no, that's absolutely not what we believe. And it was this wonderful, wonderful place where we were just offering our experiences, not trying to convince one another of anything, offering our experiences to someone who was really curious about what on earth do Christians do anyway? Like, what are you guys doing? And within that moment, I really understood that a part of how we can move forward ecumenically when either our advocacy efforts are trying, they're thwarted within our own church, or there's a lot of opposition in the community around us, is to keep asking questions of saying, I am here as part of a witness of God. You are here as part of a witness of God. The face of God is diversity, and we can coexist in a space and be in relationship until such a time that we can agree to disagree, or we can move forward. And I've had a lot of Quaker teachers in my life as well, and they would always say the relationship is the place where God appears and where way opens for transformation. And so to be in relationship with people is so difficult when they're opposed to your very existence. But there are places where queer activists, that is our role, to be in those relationships and to say, I am here. I am evidence that God has created us too as part of this. And so I will be here until such a time that you can see Jesus in my face too.
Thank you. Thank you. Like taking that all in. That was really, really fantastic what you shared, Kendra. Thank you. In my own work, in my own world, I really emphasize relationship as well. I think that's such a crucial thing for people to think on and remember. At Emmanuel College, it's an interfaith school, and so we have many classmates that are Muslim, Buddhist, humanist, Jewish, a number of traditions. And I always say I learn the most not from the readings and the courses, but from breaking bread with my classmates. Whether we are sharing a meal at an iftar during Ramadan, or I'm learning about Buddhist sacred text, or any of these things. I could read things in a book or watch a YouTube essay or whatever, what may be. But the most powerful experience that I've had is the relationship that we have with each other, and the conversations like you had with your colleague and the student about what do you believe? What does this mean for you? And how can we show up and be here with each other? Yeah. Chris or Ayodele, I'm wondering if you have a response. You don't have to, but
I mean, I've had some funny experiences and some not funny experiences. I know when in Calgary a few years ago when we did the drag Easter service, I was also in my first year of seminary, and I was also working as the admin in the office. And so I had to become a lightning rod because it got press, and you wouldn't believe the amount of phone calls that came in that were just spewing vitriol. And I mean, I remember one time somebody called and they were having this theological rant about queer people. And I said, Sir, I'm just the church secretary. I'm not a theologian, which was false because I was training to be a theologian. But it was absolutely painful. And I should not have been that person to have received that call. And I just want to say that, when you're in when you're starting to do things that are prophetic, if you do not get negative feedback, I don't think it's prophetic. Like that is part of it. But for the thing that you're being prophetic about, the person that is probably the most vulnerable, in that category shouldn't be answering it. You know what I mean? Like if you're doing some sort of queer activism as a church, don't have queer folks be the lightning rod. Have people who, like who are allies, kind of do that. And then there's always been these sort of things like why, and I think I can't remember if Kendra, you sort of answered this, but people would say, why do we always have to focus on the gay thing? And I'm like, this is about all of us. Heaven isn't heaven unless we're all there, right? And so for people who just have sort of these sort of side comments that don't necessarily realize quite how cutting and painful they're being, but their intention is just to ask a question, like, I don't understand why we're doing this. Some people were really upset. They thought that we were desacralizing Easter by having this sort of celebration thing, and those are just opportunities. Those are the places where change happens. Nobody changes their mind because of your Facebook post or your rant. People change their mind because of the relationship that they're in with someone. And so as difficult as it is, those are the moments of transformation. Like I feel like this is desacralizing Easter. Well, let's talk about what it means to be dead and now you're alive again, and the miracle of that, and what that looks like in concrete ways in this place. So, yeah, my thing is that if you're not getting negative feedback, it's not prophetic, and that those are the opportunities to really that's where change happens for people in terms of consciousness changing and paradigm shift. Yeah.
I just want to say I completely agree with that, Chris. A colleague and friend in Vancouver was talking about, they're getting hate emails or whatever for something that they're doing, and I said, I take that as a job well done, right? You're reaching people, you're striking a chord, you're making people think, maybe perhaps in a way they've never thought before, and that should be viewed as success for sure. Um, I completely agree. Thank you.
I haven't experienced a lot of opposition necessarily within, say, a church congregation. I would say the most opposition I've faced is within my own family, with primarily my mom, who is Seventh-day Adventist, and is I love her dearly, but it almost has a tunnel vision of who a Christian can be. And so I feel it's my work to kind of like make it panoramic and involves everybody. Um, and so, the work is within my family system, but I I also feel like the work is also within the Bible. It says you'll know them by their fruits, and I feel that we can each be an example and each be example of love and or conduit of love within our communities. And I think when people see that we love and that we show up and that we're present, uh, in all aspects, whether it's a loved one who's passed away, praying for someone within your congregation or in your workplace. These are ways we show up, and these are ways that we can show our humanity. Um, and we don't have to highlight our differences. We are here because we are here in this forum because we love God, and we're here um, to be a conduit of that, And so I just feel that the ways that we show up can demonstrate that, can be an example of that. The way we live our lives, the things we do, say, or don't do, these are all ways that we can show up in our communities and um, counteract this kind of maybe negative criticism to the different ways we express our faith.
Thank you. I have one final question for the three of you before we open the floor to those in the room. what are your dreams for the future when it comes to your activism, your community, the work that you're doing, the brightest future you can imagine? What does it look like?
I can start this one. So within the United Church, we have a couple of different mechanisms for advocacy. And one of them is that there is a position that's whose job is to speak to federal and provincial governments. And in my wildest dream, the government pays attention to what we say. But I think on the other side of that, we are saying things in the United Church and in the Christian church writ large. There was this past year at the AGM in Calgary, the annual general meeting for the National Church, an apology that was issued to the 2S-LGBTQIA+ community. And the apology was issued by the church to the church. And it was offered as sort of a waypoint or a signpost along a path of advocacy and transformation. And I think in my wildest dreams, I would see not just the United Church, but Christianity in general, in the ecumenical sense, really walk a path of repair, not just with queer community, but with how the path has strayed from justice and care and kindness in the church. And I think as institutions go, the church is not special. There are always places where institutions begin and places where we end up going that we didn't foresee perhaps 2,000 years ago. And that in and of itself is prophetic. But I would dream that restoration would become a central tenet of what it means to follow the Christ light. And that, as Chris said earlier, what did you say? Put your foot to it, right? To actually do things with it and to acknowledge that the reason why we are doing it is because we are truly seeking to follow God. So, we have soup kitchens, we have all of these things. And for example, saying that, we have a soup kitchen because people are hungry. Yes, that is why we have soup kitchens. But we also have soup kitchens because of the inequitable distribution of wealth in this country, because of colonialism, because of exclusionary policies, because of neoliberalism, because of all of these things. And that is also why we have oppression of the 2S LGBTQIA+ community. And so thinking about apology and repair and restoration as the central work for the church over the next, millennia might make a really big difference, not just to us, but to creation in general. That's what I would want. A road to Damascus moment where everybody thinks, oh, right, let's get to it. Let's get to work. That's what I would love to see.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just dropped those three words in the chat. I think it's really succinct to the point, right? Apology, repair, restoration. What an important process. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that I really appreciate about the American pulpit is how edgy it can be. Yesterday or this week, we saw the shooting in Minnesota. Yesterday morning, there were 50 clergy who had gathered together from across the state to speak to this and the rising injustices that are happening. And I think that for the Canadian church, and I mean like Anglican, Lutheran, Presbyterian, everybody, you know, it develops an edge and that it's the knee-jerk response to get out there and do something right away rather than just towing this politically correct line. We have developed a culture of niceness, which we've mistaken as Christian love, because sometimes it's it's not there. The love that I need is for you to have my back. That's the love I need, not for you to be smile to my face and be mean behind my back, right? And so, like, I think that if we could be more edgy as clergy, as communities of faith, and responding right away to things, and in a loud way, and in a meaningful way, not just for the sake of witness and evangelism, but for the sake of making the world better. Kendra, like that's a really great point. Like we have these soup kitchens, but we're not addressing the eradication of poverty. And I don't think that you should tell me who I should vote for from the pulpit, but if you're not telling me what a Christian vote looks like, then that's problematic, right? If it's not for, if you're not pressing me to vote for politicians who are going to hold up reconciliation and indigenous sovereignty, if you're not, speaking and preaching with passion about rights for people, like those, that needs to start happening. And I mean, we get, well, what if we lose the power brokers? What if we lose the people who are keeping the lights on? I'm like, yeah, I don't have an answer for that other than, a farewell card or something. Like, because we've lost our edge. And so for me, the best outcome would be that we became really edgy. And it's happening. I see it mostly in the United Church. Like you guys have the corner on becoming more and more edgy, but in that public way. But for all churches to kind of do that, I think would be so amazing.
Thanks, Chris. I think your comment about preaching from the pulpit is really, really interesting, and it's something that I think about a lot when I'm writing sermons and liturgy, the order of service, is that I can't tell people what party to vote for. You're right, but we can talk about affordable housing. We can talk about um, uh, guaranteed livable income. We can talk about bike lanes, right? We can talk about so many things that are important to the safety, well-being, building of community. And, people can do the math about which, how that looks in our practical life. And one of the things that I've heard that I think is connected to what you said is Christ, Jesus. He certainly was kind and he certainly put the foot forward in building community, but he probably wasn't always very nice. And I think about that a lot. And I think that's really connected to what you were saying there. So thank you.
Yeah, I piggyback on everything, Kendra, Chris, Jules, that you've said with regards to that dream. I too would like to see, restoration, repair, apology. Uh, Coming from my faith, where I was a member within the Adventist Church. I mean, I think that the United Church can be a mentor to other churches, and they are. Um, and within the Seventh-day Adventist Church as well, I think that there could be some sort of a partnership. That I would love to see that in a sense, because there are a lot of wonderful people within the Adventist Church who love and have a passion for Christ. But then when it comes to issues of homosexuality, it's like there's this 180 uh, presence there, uh, condemnation. So I would love, because there are people within the Adventist Church who are hiding. They're living a double life. And so in my dream would be that the United Church could support the Seventh-day Adventist Church to be affirming and embracing across the board. There are churches within the United States, but I'd like to see more here in Canada. And I would like to see like a Seventh-day Adventist queer church here in Canada. I would like to see that.
What a beautiful dream. Thank you so much to the three of you, for all of you here in the room. We will hold a bit of space for questions or comments or compliments, if any of you have anything that you'd like to offer either in the chat or on your microphone to our panelists. Denis, I see your hand.
This is a big question, and I'm not sure that any of you can answer it, but piggybacking off what Kendra said about provincial governments listening, I live in Quebec, and so being active in any space, queer or otherwise, and advocating for people is becoming more and more of an issue. And one of my fondest memories was last summer marching in the Montreal Pride Parade with a couple of folks from different denominations. There were Presbyterians, United, etc. But just knowing we might not be allowed to do that this Pride because of these new anti-public religion laws and stuff, and trying to navigate those things.
Yeah, thank you. A tricky place to be in, where you love the work that you're doing and it's so meaningful, and you don't know if you're going to be able to keep doing it. My initial response to you, Denis, is do it anyway. Do it
Exactly.
anyway. For a very long time, queerness was illegal here and is very illegal still in much of the world. And who knows, in Alberta, New Brunswick, Quebec, maybe it will be illegal again. You can be damn sure we're going to keep doing it anyway. People are in loving relationships, people transition, people find each other and find community and find God, despite whether or not the government says we're allowed to. And so that's my initial response. my gut response to you, Denis, is do it anyway. Show up anyway. It means something, and it's very, very powerful.
Yeah, I would say the same thing, Denny. And one of the things that really strikes me in what you're saying is that you would essentially have to go into the closet in order to participate in the Pride Parade as, a public religion. And I think that if, for example, you did go into the Pride Parade, you could do so as a private citizen if you were questioned by police, who just so happened to be there with a whole bunch of other private citizens that you know from church. Like, it's got nothing to do with religion, but we're just here in our capacity as people who are interested in our community, and those sorts of things. You cannot. I firmly believe that you cannot allow laws and restrictions to be placed on your solidarity. Otherwise, Otherwise, what are we doing? You know what I mean? The thing that I often think about when I'm afraid or worried, or if I feel that there's pushback or somebody is trying to compress or shrink down my voice, compress or shrink down what I'm trying to do, is I think about who I'm answering to. So, as part of my life, yes, I'm employed by the United Church. Yes, I have citizenship, all of these things. And first and foremost, I am accountable to God, to my faith. And if somebody says, oh, no, you can't do that, like, says who? Who says I can't live my life like this? Who says I can't live my life advocating for human rights? Because it is a God-given thing. Nobody can say that. Keep going. Yeah. I'm sorry that you're facing that, but keep going.
Thanks.
Thank you, Denise. Ruth has put a question in the chat, Ayodele, for you, saying they have a number of friends who too were part of Exodus International and have now left the church because of their experience there. How did you stay in the church? And what would you say to those who have left that could maybe inspire them to return?
Thank you, Ruth, for your question. Yeah, my experience within Exodus International, it's kind of with a heavy heart. I can understand the pain and the reason why. I too have friends that have parted ways with Christianity, period, because of their experience within ex-gay ministries. I stayed because I felt like God never left. I left the church and I left my friends and I turned away from the Adventist community, and I had a moment with God. It was painful. There were times where I was really, really depressed and really down, thinking that, maybe life would be better if I was not here. It was that low. But in that moment, I felt that God reached out to me and encouraged me to live, and not just to live in secret, but to live out loud and to get supports, to meet other people who are also on the same path, on the same journey of acceptance. And it was that relationship with God that allowed me to stay. And I didn't necessarily stay within a congregation, but stay in relationship with God and stay in prayer with God, to still see God show up in my life. At a low point, a family member, a queer family member, sent me an autobiography. I mean, it was timely, it was needed, and it was an autobiography about another person who was coming out. And these are ways that God showed up in my life, and it was that relationship that no matter what I heard on the radio or what pastor said this, it was that relationship with God that said, okay, they can say this, but I see you. I love you. I'm holding you. I'm taking care of you financially, giving you work, roof overhead. Like, I saw all of the blessings that God was still giving me, even though I had maybe family members telling me that I'm living wrong, or I should do this. But it was constantly being held and pursued by God. I felt that has kept me in faith and has encouraged me to even come to Emmanuel College. At one point, I wanted nothing to do with faith-based education at all. So to even come to Emmanuel College and be a part and become a member of United Church it is all for a personal relationship with God. And that's what I would encourage. And even if people have left, to encourage them to come back and to remember what God has done for them, where God has brought them. And if they feel that nudging, that pulling, to know that they can come back, and they can come back to a church like United Church where they are accepted. Yeah, that's I hope I answered your question.
It was a really beautiful and powerful answer, Ayodele, and it was reminding me of, one of the first conversations we had outside of class. We were at a student, I think, end of year gathering or something, and you were asking me some questions because you were thinking about adding the MDiv to your, degrees that you're studying. And I think, we were talking about, God put you here. And here you are now surrounded by people who are excited to know you and hear you. And you're having these opportunities laid out in front of you. And if you're feeling these nudges, there's probably a reason for that. And here you are. And what a magnificent story you've shared. So thank you so much. Is there anybody else? Anybody else with any questions, comments, compliments for the panelists? The three of you are amazing, and I'm so grateful for this time we've had together today. Hmm. All right. With that, beloveds, we will end here, and I will say that God is with you. You are beloved, and don't you ever forget it, because there's nothing you can do about it. Have a blessed afternoon, evening, morning, wherever you are, and we'll see you next time.